Good afternoon or late morning for our West Coast friends. This is Tim Serantonio, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Neon One here. I am excited for today's presentation, which is a nonprofit toolkit for dealing with COVID-19. But really, there's a lot of great information that our partner Gregg Bossen is going to be able to dive into before we dive in. Yeah, and I got him to do the webcam and the whole thing, the whole 9 yards for this. So
I've never done webcam
you've
before.
never
Like
done the
I've never,
webcam.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And
And
I
he's
was
like,
gonna
do I change shirts? And I'm like, no, man, like people like the authenticity. There's a good chance, folks, that my kids are going to run into the room during this. So it's just how we're dealing with it. So practical items before we hand it over to Gregg. Today is being recorded. I just confirmed that it is. So if you have to duck out early or if you're watching this later, great. You know, we got the whole thing being recorded. There'll be some polls that we'll be asking that Gregg's team had us load in. That's some are fun because it's Gregg. Gregg's always doing either something fun or very good information that's going to be helpful. So that's why we love having him here as part of the Neon One Ecosystem's NPO's Rise campaign. So if you're not familiar with Neon One, just the host of today's webinar, we're a technology and services ecosystem designed explicitly for mission-driven organizations. We do a lot of different stuff. We have a CRM. We do peer-to-peer fundraising. We do giving days. So if you're going to be participating in Giving Tuesday now, for instance, you might be one of the communities doing that. Oh, you're going to pull up the website.
see, I am.
You're going to
Yeah,
click into the. Yep, there we go. All right. See, thank you very much, sir.
no
Uh,
worries, no worries.
So
If it
yeah,
ever pop up.
basically, yeah, whenever it loads up. So go to neon1.com. You'll be able to check it out.
There it is.
This is part of our big kind of MPO's Rise campaign. So if you go to neon1.com, click Let's Go, that is a wealth of resources for organizations. So there's stuff on Giving Tuesday. You could set up free consultations, not sales calls, consultations with our team on a variety of topics. We have tons and tons of blogs, resource centers, special offers. This is just a lot of stuff that we're doing for across the industry. And so what we're really excited about for today is, and we could pop on back, thank you very much, Gregg, for that, but we're going to be diving into a lot of things relating to loans, a lot of things relating to just how to navigate what's happening with the CARES Act as it relates to nonprofits. And there'll be times where Gregg might ask a yes or no question. Feel free to use the chat for that, but we also do have a Q&A for kind of dedicated questions. We have the expert when it comes to nonprofits and accounting and all things finance and back end. So like, make use of this time. We're really excited about that. There is a handout of the slides too. There's a wealth of information in there, so feel free to download that. But if for some reason you can't find it or something like that, we'll be following up and diving in. But other than that, Gregg, the show is yours.
All right. Okay, cool. So far, I have been answering questions about COVID and the the loans for, I don't know, a few weeks. And I was commenting, Tim, it's so funny because I've got to learn about all this. Well, I almost said something else, stuff, and then it's all going to be moot in like 3 months. It'll be all gone,
Yep.
and nobody, so it's kind of funny there. So I want to make sure everybody can hear me. So if you could just put something in the chat box, yes, too loud, too soft, or just right, and then Tim, you can just let me know to make sure that they can hear me, because that's always important. I want to make sure my sound is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay, cool. It
Yeah.
also lets us know what the delay is on time.
All right, and it's still going to the Q&A. So it's just
That's
my
okay.
grand vision.
That's
My
okay.
grand vision is over. Yes, everybody says you sound great. So let's.
Okay. So again, if you, I love chat. He can read the chat, but if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. Otherwise, put it in the chat. And if I ask you a quick question on the fly, put it in the chat. So chat is better than Q&A. We'll just leave it.
And maybe they don't even see that, so it doesn't matter. We got it. It's all good.
Nothing matters in this world.
No,
All right.
nothing.
So okay. So this is all about how to deal with COVID if you are a nonprofit organization. This is me. For those of you that haven't learned from me before, I'm a CPA. I specialize in nonprofit organizations. And in addition to that, I own a company called QuickBooks Made Easy. And QuickBooks Made Easy, all we do is teach nonprofits how to use QuickBooks. We have streamable training that you can get online that's on demand. We have nonprofit technical support that you can sign up for, and you can get your questions answered. We can even dial into your computer, take it over, and help you out as you're dealing with QuickBooks. Yes, we know about the mapping between Neon and QuickBooks if that's something that you're interested in. And can help you with that. And we also do, well, we used to do live seminars. These days we're not. We're just doing webinars across the country. So anyway, I do want to point out a webinar that's happening next Thursday, May 7th. It's on PPP loans again. It's just for people that already have a PPP loan, and it's about tracking that in QuickBooks and how to maximize your loan forgiveness. And then the other thing I want to point out is a couple of webinars that we have in May that are basically soup to nuts how to use QuickBooks. Okay, it's 2 hours a day for 3 days. I'll point it out again at the end. These are the coupons to give you some money off, but let's get into the topics first. All right, you got to see whether I'm any good, right, before you sign up for something else. All right, so what is available for nonprofits? So there are 5 things that we're going to cover that are available for nonprofit organizations. The first one is called the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or the EIDL is what you'll see it called, okay? And this is a loan. I mean, it's a straight up loan, and you have to pay it back, all right? The interest rate's really good. But anyway, that's one thing you can get. You can get it directly from the SBA. We're going to cover that first. Part of that loan is an advance. And when you fill out the application, you can get the advance, and then you don't have to return the advance even if you don't get the loan. So it's kind of part of number one, but it's that $10,000 advance you've been hearing about. So we're going to talk about that next. Then we're going to talk about the Payroll Protection Loan, or the Payroll Protection Program. This is the huge one that they've had 2 rounds of funding on. The second round just came out at the beginning of this week. And so far they're moving slow as Christmas. But this is the one that's forgivable. And we're going to spend a chunk of time on that. And then we're going to have 2 credits, tax credits, that we need to talk about. And these are really important, particularly if you aren't lucky enough to get a PPP loan, because if you don't get the loan, you could still get these credits. One is a credit specifically if you have an employee that has COVID, or you have an employee that's taking care of somebody that has COVID. You can get a tax credit for the amount you paid them. The other one is called an employee retention credit. This one is really good, and because it's up to $5,000 an employee, and that's another credit that you can get. So those are the 5 things that we're going to talk about, all right? So before we dive into the first one, why don't we go ahead and run the first poll, and this will be a fun one. Just kind of see what you are doing right now, and I can't see anything that's happening, so you want to go ahead and do that?
I will tell you.
Okay.
We got our poll here. We've learned recently that we can work from just about anywhere. Be honest. Where are you right now? This is multiple choice.
Right.
Choice.
Especially if you're in bed. I know there's somebody that's in bed. And
you had a few other ones about being outside and stuff, but GoToWebinar only allows us 5 options. So.
Oh, okay. Oh well, that's unfortunate.
So,
anyway.
So only 2% of people are hiding from kids. I'm counting myself as that's my answer, because that is happening. And some folks are, they're saying they're working from their actual office and things of that.
Cool.
And Greg, I do know that. And how are we doing in terms of, we're almost a minute in, got about 65%. So how about I go ahead and close it off?
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, that's good. All right, because I want some,
Most people are working in their home office, 61%. Few people are, and then pretty evenly, only 1% of people are hiding from their kids in their car.
All right. So I guess you're the only parent that.
I'm not in my car, but I am hiding.
All right. So I want you to stop looking at Facebook, stop looking at your email, and stop listening to anybody else, and pay attention, because this is important stuff, and we're going to get into the meat of it, okay? And I'm going to go kind of quick. So you ready? So off we go. So the first thing we're going to cover is this first loan, which is called the SBA, Small Business Administration, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This is also called an EIDL, and you will see it called that all over things. Anyway, so what is it? This is a loan, and the loan must be paid back, okay? This is not the PPP loan. This is a different loan. Who do you get it through? You get it directly through the Small Business Administration. What is the interest rate? The interest rate is 2.75%, which is good, okay? That's actually a really low interest rate. When does the payback start? A year after you get the loan. So you immediately don't have to pay anything back for a year. The loan can be as long as 30 years. There's no closing costs whatsoever. You can use it now. Pay attention here. You can use it for payroll. You can use it for rent. You can use it for accounts payable, which means basically your operating expenses you have bills for. And you can also use it for loan payments. So it's less restrictive than the PPP loan, but of course, you have to pay this one back, okay? Not all of it though. Do I need to guarantee it? Only if the loan is over $200,000. So this loan is something that you would get by going to SBA.gov, and I'm going to go there right now. This is a picture of it, but I'm going to go there right now to SBA.gov. There it is. And then you just go SBA.gov. When you get to the very first page, you can either click here or you can click down here. I'll click up here. And they're going to give you all kinds of information, but what you're looking for, this is why I like to actually show you what it is that you're looking for here. So you want to look for this one that says coronavirus funding options. And once we do that, click here to learn about available SBA loans. You're going to click it, and you're going to get something that tells you that right now, here we are. No, not yet. All right. So here is the Paycheck Protection Program, which we're going to do in a second. Here is the EIDL loan. They're calling it advanced, but this is basically where you would apply for a loan. And in addition, you would get the advance, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you click on that, that's where you apply for the loan. Now, right now, today, as I'm talking to you, when you click on that, let me click on it. I believe it did an hour ago. It's going to tell us that there is, right now, SBA is unable to accept new applications at this time based on the available appropriations funding. So basically, they had a round of funding. They used it all up a few weeks ago. They got a new round of funding, but there were so many people in the pipeline that I think they're concerned about taking any more applications on this until they empty out whatever it is that already has been asked for. So I guess what I'm saying to you is it may be too late to get this. All right, I'm just going to tell you that, this loan. But anyway, so in case you are lucky enough to be able to get it, I would keep checking back at SBA.gov and see if they open that up again so that you can get this loan. Now,
Hey, and Greg,
yes.
just a quick question, because we have some good questions already rolling in. Do you want me to kind of pop in?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So one, I think we don't really need to dive into too deeply because it was any deadline for the EIDL. Well, no, because there's no money.
Right. That's right.
So that's that one. Let's see. Question about the PPP loan forgiveness. So I don't know if you want to.
No, we got a whole chapter on that a little bit later on. That's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. Any questions about PPP, wait, okay? Just let me get through this and then we'll get to PPP.
And then there was also another one about the 8-week period, but then AIP.
That's PPP again.
Yep. Okay, so we'll just hold off on those. Okay, yeah. Then there's actually a lot of PPP ones, so we'll.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. I'm going to do the rest of this really quick. Now,
awesome.
Even if you don't want to do the loan, because, and I get this. I mean, I don't want to borrow money that I have to pay back. I want money I get to keep. You want, and I assume a lot of you already did this, you want to go ahead and act like you're applying for the loan anyway, because when you do that, and you do it online at SBA.gov, you can check a box saying that you need an advance, and that amount you actually get to keep even if you don't end up going through with the loan. So, and that brings us to our second thing, which is the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advance. So basically, this is a piece of that first one that we talked about. So first, you go to SBA.gov, you apply for the EIDL loan, you ask for, there's a little box you can check if they ever open it up again, and you can say you want the advance. Originally, it said $10,000, but they only actually give you $1,000 per employee. So you have a loan with the SBA. This is the theory of how it works. You apply for a loan with the SBA. And before you ever go through the process of actually finalizing the loan, you can check the box to get an advance. And the advance gets deposited into your bank account. And I'm going to ask, is there anybody that applied for this and got it? And go ahead and put it in the chat, that little advance. If you do, go ahead.
Yeah, somebody did get it. We got a bunch of yeses. We did have somebody that asked how long is that particular loan taking the process, because they applied on March 25th.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that also.
Got it.
All right.
Great.
So in theory, you apply for the loan with the SBA, you get an advance, you keep it, and then when the loan officer calls you or emails you, you say, no thanks, I don't want the loan. You still get to keep the advance. Okay, so you apply for the loan. It's an initial application only. It takes 10 minutes. You ask for the advance. They actually want your bank info so that they can deposit the money immediately. They put the money into your account. The one person's like, hadn't happened to me yet. I agree. I applied as well, and they haven't put it into my account. When you're contacted about your loan, you say no thanks. You keep the money. Okay, so that's basically how it works. You still are supposed to use it for payroll costs. And I'm going to say this now, and I'll say it again later. To those of you that got the advance, what's supposed to happen is if you get a PPP loan, say they apply, you get approved for a $20,000 PPP loan. When you sign the documents, they ask you if you've gotten an advance. Say you got an advance of $2,000. So they're going to loan you 20. You've told them you got an advance of 2,000. So the loan document is actually supposed to say 22,000 from the bank. And then you prove to the bank how you spent the EIDL advance as well as the PPP loan. Now, is that happening in real life? Of course it's not. We're all crazy. But just telling you, that's what's supposed to happen. So
you can do both, because we have some folks who are asking, can you do both loans? Okay.
Yes, you can do both. That's exactly right. Okay. Now, to those of you that already applied, when you apply, you will get this email. Well, actually, I think you were able to print it out at the moment that you did the application. Now, I applied on March the 30th. All right. And when I applied, I got this saying application submitted, and there's this number here.
Mm-hmm.
And that I held on to. If you've not gotten this money yet, you need to make a phone call. You need to call 800-659-2955. You will get someone, you read them this loan application number. If you don't have it because you didn't print it out, then perhaps you can give them other information and they can look it up. They will tell you that they can't help you and they have no idea. Then you ask to speak to their supervisor, and when you do that, you will get a human being. You'll be able to find out what's going on with your loan application. For me, and this might happen for some of you, I doubt it, when I filled out my federal identification number on the application, this is for the advance, and then I had to give them my bank info. Tim, the bank info that I gave them was for an account that was tied to my social security number instead of the federal ID number of my business.
Yeah.
And so they didn't give me the money and they didn't tell me about the problem. And the only way that they found out and I found out is by calling them and asking for a supervisor.
And somebody actually did say, I applied but not received anything except for a confirmation and an application number. So Paige, call that number, follow Gregg's steps.
Yeah. All right. Enough of that. All right. So who can apply for this loan? 501c3s, public charities, faith-based organizations, and private foundations. So 501c3s, all of these, public charities, faith-based organizations, and private foundations, they are all 501c3s and they can all apply for the loan. Other 501s, maybe you're a membership association, that's a 501c6. Maybe you're a civic league, that's a 501c4. Maybe you're a social club, that's all of you should be able to apply. All right, so that's the deal with that. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the Payroll Protection Program. See, I know this is the meat of it. So now, is there, before I do that, is there any other questions on that other loan?
Somebody did say I had $10,000 deposited into my account. Is that the loan or the advance?
That's the advance.
That's the
That person
advance.
must have more than, let me tell you, the loan itself, you will eventually get a call or an email, and they're going to want you to jump through all these hoops and sign a loan doc and all this kind of stuff, and you just tell them forget it, and then you keep that 10,000.
This is a good one. Does the interest start on the first day, even though you don't pay back for a year?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I should. And I should have looked that up, and I don't know the answer to the question. I would think that the interest wouldn't start accruing, but I don't know. I'm sorry. I thought about that this morning. It is a good question. If you want to Google it while I'm teaching, I'm more than happy to let you.
It does. Somebody did say it does. So
It does start the day you get the loan?
that's, I mean, we'll independently confirm.
Yeah, we need to check that. We need to check that. I'd be surprised. But
Okay.
anyway, all right. Okay. So let's move on. So this is the third thing, and this is the thing that everybody's freaked out about. Okay. This is what we're all trying to get. It's like this giant race is basically what it is. So what we've got here, it's called the Payroll Protection Program, or PPP, and then I'm calling it Payroll Protection Loan. It's a loan, but the difference between the other loan is that this loan can be forgivable, and we're going to talk about that. Who do you get it through? You get it through an eligible financial institution who then gets the money from the SBA ultimately if it's forgiven. So basically, you don't go to the SBA, you go to an eligible financial institution. Now, can we talk here for a minute? And Tim, if you've been listening, this is the deal. If you are with a local community bank, and you can sit in front of somebody's desk and say, hey, or call them on the phone, or they call you and they walk you through the process at the bank, you stand a decent chance of getting this loan. At least you did. Okay. If you are with a large bank, you're probably screwed. Okay. Now you can get it from a large bank, but it's exceedingly difficult because they've delayed their processes have to be built up. I'm with Wells Fargo Bank. I applied on April the 3rd. I'm still trying to get approved. All right. So, I mean, it's very difficult. And the other thing about this is, and I'm just gonna be honest with you right now, if you have not applied for this loan yet, most likely it's going to be too late. There's too many people ahead of you in line. Unless there's a third round of funding, you're probably not going to be able to get the money. Okay. But anyway, what's the interest rate on the loan? It's 1% for up to 2 years. So even if you don't get the loan forgivable, it's still a good loan. It's 1% up to 2 years and 4% after that. The payback doesn't start until 6 months to a year. It's supposed to be 6 months, but some of the banks are saying a year. Remember, this is flowing through the banks, and every bank is trying to figure out what the rules are. The rules are cloudy. They're changing every single day. And so you're going to get different answers on this depending upon who you go through. What's the loan length? 2 years at 1%, and then you can refinance it for another 8 years. Okay. Are there closing costs? No. What can you use it for? Now, this is more restrictive than the other loan. It's payroll, and we'll talk about what that means, rent, mortgage, and utilities. Okay. So not accounts payable like the other loan. Do you need to guarantee it? No, you don't. All right. Now, the best thing about this loan is that it's forgivable, either entirely forgivable or partially forgivable. And that's what I think a lot of your questions have to do with. And we're going to get to that in a second. Okay.
I do.
So,
and maybe just tell me if you are going to answer this, because
mhm.
multiple folks have said, like, how do I know I got these loans? Basically.
Okay.
Like,
Now, if you applied, you will definitely know because you have to sign a promissory note
got it.
with the bank before you get the loan. All right. Now, before I do this, I'm going to show you 3 big questions, but this is probably the most important poll. So I want everybody to answer. Go ahead and pop up the poll. I want to see where you are in the process of PPP, of getting these loans. And unfortunately, again, I can't see any of this stuff. So you're going to have to, well, you're going to have to talk, Tim.
I know. It's my children are having meltdown city, so I'm trying to mute myself so there's not screaming children in the background.
Screaming children's okay.
Okay, so with more than half already announced, or voted. 59% have already been funded.
Good.
14% haven't applied yet. 10% applied, but they haven't heard anything. 16% have been accepted, but just haven't received the funds yet.
Okay. All right. Okay. So to apply for the funds, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this now to cover the 14% of you that haven't applied yet. I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but it's probably too late. I'll just be honest with you. But if you can't go through your eligible bank, the bank that you have a relationship with, the one that I've been telling people to go through is Kabbage, K-A-B-B-A-G-A-E. I have no relationship with them whatsoever. It's simply because it's a very easy to run application. It's very quick. So it's Kabbage.com. So go ahead and apply as soon as this webinar is over and hope for a miracle. All right. So, all right, enough of that. Whoops, there we go. So here's 3 questions about the PPP loan. 1, who can apply? 2, how much can the loan be for? And then the big question, how do I make it forgivable? So we're going to start with who can apply. It's all the same people that can apply for the other loan, except it does not let 501c6s, 501c4s. So it's only 501c3s, public charities, faith-based organizations, private foundations, veterans organizations, and tribal business concerns. That's it. So your 501c6s, 501c4s, C7s, you can't apply. It's just public charities. Okay, so that's the first question. And of course, you have to have less than 500 employees. Okay, so that's who can apply. How much is the loan? Now, this is another thing where it gets real confusing, because when you fill out the loan application, a lot of you know this, there's all these things they ask you, and somehow that's supposed to determine what your loan amount is. And the rules have been changing, and they're different with the different banks. Even though there really should be only one rule, the interpretation is very confusing. And so the banks, they didn't really even know what the rules were, so they just asked all these questions. For instance, you cannot get a loan to pay independent contractors. So let me just do this right now. If you want a PPP loan, you must have payroll. Payroll meaning W-2s. If you have independent contractors, you can't borrow money to pay them off this thing. They're supposed to be able to go in and create their own PPP loan for themselves. You got it? So that's the deal with that. Does that make sense, Tim?
It does. Somebody actually asked an interesting question. Can a 501c3 get the PPP loan on behalf of a fiscally sponsored organization?
On behalf of a fiscally sponsored organization. Now, that's really interesting. I'm going to say probably not. I doubt that that's the case. And so technically, it's probably not. Functionally, it's definitely not. And what I mean by that is we don't got much time, folks. And so the banks want something that's really easy to understand. So when you apply for the loan, you're going to upload the W-2s and the W-3s. So if those employees are part of the fiscally sponsored organization and not your organization, they're going to put you in an exception pile. And by the time they get around to reaching out to you, the money will be gone.
Somebody did say they know of a fiscally sponsored organization for the PPP, but as you were mentioning, it really kind of depends on the local bank you might be talking to, too.
Yeah, if you have a community bank that you can sit in front of and they can work out those details and manually upload the application once it's approved to the SBA, then you're okay. Everybody else, forget it. Okay. So that's the deal with that.
We still got stuff coming in, but you'll probably answer a bunch of them, and we'll have time for Q&A too. So.
Okay. So how much can the loan be for? So this is pretty simple when you look at it on its face, 2.5 times the average monthly payroll costs. Now, what the heck does average mean, and what the heck does payroll costs mean? Okay. Payroll costs means gross wages on the paychecks. Okay. So when you're computing the dollar amount of what your loan asks for, is you use the gross wage on the paycheck. As long as the annualization of that isn't more than 100K. So if it's more than 100K, then you have to act like the person only made 100,000 when you're computing how much your loan amount's going to be. So I'm going to show this to you, and I want you to, Tim, I hope you're looking, because you're the only one I can talk to. I want to make sure I'm explaining this right. So look at this. Say we have employee John. Their gross salary is $50,000 for the year. When you're trying to determine what the COVID loan is going to be, salaries for John is $50,000 for the year. Jane makes $125,000 for the year. When you're trying to determine what the amount should be for the COVID loan, we act like she only makes $100,000. They won't fund anything that puts you over $100,000. Okay, so the total here is $150,000, and I'll just run it through. You take $150,000 a year, divide it by 12 months, and if you're thinking to yourself, which 12 months? Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. You divide it by 12, that's a monthly average of $12,500. You multiply it by 2.5, the total loan amount's $31,250. All right?
Got it.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay.
Now, going back to this, so what do they mean by gross? They mean base pay. They mean bonus and commission. Yes, they mean vacation. Yes, they mean sick. Yes, they mean family. And it also includes on top of this certain employer paid costs like health insurance, the employer paid portion. So if you have an employee and you deduct health insurance from their check and then you pay it on their behalf, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the money you pay on top of their gross pay. So if you withhold $100 from their paycheck and you pay in $300, then the amount that you can ask for, that you can include in getting a loan for is only the $200 because the other 100 was already included in their gross pay. Same thing with retirement 403B plans. It's not the amount that the employee pays in, that's already part of their gross. It's just the amount that you pay on top of it, the matching share, okay? Now, this is one where people, including banks, by the way, are very confused about. Employer paid state taxes. Now, they do not mean that when you're computing your payroll cost for the loan, you're supposed to include your state withholding. That's part of the gross. That's not supposed to be included in the loan amount. It's only what you pay as an employer on behalf of the employee to the state, and that's going to be your state unemployment and certain other things. Most states it's just state unemployment, but some unfortunate states like California, I think New Jersey, they have these weird other taxes that the employer pays. All right. So anyway, enough of that. Okay, so that's payroll costs. Okay, so just going back to this. Go ahead.
And does dental and vision count for benefits as well? Okay,
yes,
great.
it does. Yes, it does.
And there's some questions relating to like timing and payroll schedule and stuff like that. I don't know if that's appropriate here or...
That's what I'm getting to next.
Great. Okay.
Because the next question is, and I want you to just follow me here. Notice how I've gone back to the original slide. 2.5 times the average monthly payroll cost. We know what payroll costs are. We don't know what they mean by average monthly. So what does average monthly mean? It means an average over 12 months. Now, the law says that you can use the 2019 calendar year, but if you're thinking to yourself, Greg, I hired 3 employees in January 2020, so those employees I can't include, but yet I want to pay those employees, that's not fair. So the law says, okay, you can include any 12-month period that includes 2020 if you'd like. For instance, maybe I'll do April 1 through 3/31, okay? You could do that, okay? What if you're a seasonal organization and a lot of your employees are just busy during this time, but dead the rest of the year? If I used an average over 12 months, my loan wouldn't really reflect the true cost of the employees that I have to pay during this spring season. Well, then you can use a time period that is basically 3 months or 4 months or whatever. Some people say 2/15 of 2019 to June 30, 2020. Some people say 3/1 of 19 to June 30, 2020. But you can use that to compute what your average is, okay? What if you're a new organization and you don't have any payroll last year, okay? Then they let you use January and February of 2020. Now, Tim, and everyone should listen to me. This is really important. This is what you're supposed to be able to do, okay? But the reality of the situation is, if you do anything other than calendar year, you're probably screwed and you won't get the loan. And here's why. Banks are dealing with hundreds of thousands of these applications, and they want something that's very easy to have backup for. If you apply and use calendar year and you give them your W-2s and your W-3 as backup, then it's real easy. The loan officer looks at it, everything's fine, boom, it gets sent to the SBA and you get in line. If there's anything other than that, it gets put in an exception file, and By the time they get around to asking for additional documentation, the party is over, the money is gone. So if you haven't yet applied for this thing, and we're getting to the forgiveness part in a second, so I know if you've already applied, this doesn't mean much to you, but anyway, if you haven't applied, say 2019 calendar year, do yourself a favor. If you think to yourself this is unfair, you need to get over it, okay? Understand this is a race, people. There's only a finite amount of money, and there are hundreds of thousands of businesses going after it, and you are in the same fight with all the for-profit businesses in this country, all right? So that's what average means, okay? So I think that's it. So now I'm ready to go for, so now I'm ready for the third question, which is how much is forgivable? But I'll stop for a second because we're going to spend about 20 minutes here and see if there's any other questions that I can answer before we move on. What do you think, Tim?
Well, and we're getting some feedback that some folks are like, well, I gave them an Excel spreadsheet with my information. We got that as opposed to a W-2. Some of them said I used a different time period. There's always going to be, that's why there's that long list of what's acceptable. So, but what you're saying is more often than not, especially as we get toward the tail end of the availability of this, the simplest answer is going to be the easiest one to qualify for.
Right. And if you sent them Excel spreadsheets and you're with a local community bank, you're probably okay. If you sent them Excel spreadsheets and you're with a larger bank and you haven't heard anything, this is probably why. Okay. But it's too late to change now. Try calling them up and changing it. Good luck with that. You'll be put at the end of the line again. It's like bad news, but I'm just being honest with you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's what we need.
Yeah.
Direct honesty at this point.
So like I had a friend, they applied for the cabbage loan, and right on the cabbage loan, on this right here, when you click apply now, you'll go through some questions, and it says like, do you want to include health insurance? And then it says, if you answer yes to this question, it will significantly delay the processing of your application. So he's like, nope. So, and on the cabbage application, they don't even give you a choice about time period. They say, what were your wages last year? And please upload your W-2 because they're trying to automate it to make it quick. So anyway, that's what the deal is with that.
Yeah, so, and somebody did just on that final point, because again, this is the interesting thing about like building relationships. There's so many different financial potential engagements, right? You got credit unions and all the different type of stuff. And somebody's like, well, we got our loan, but we're great friends with the small local credit union in our town.
Exactly.
That helps relationships.
Which I will tell you before we move on, and this is a takeaway. If I were you, and I didn't do this myself, but I'm going to, I would have two banking relationships. I would have one banking relationship with somebody big, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whatever, Chase, and then I would find a local community bank that does give loans, and I would walk in and I would bring flowers and I would introduce myself and I'd open up an account and I would spend some time getting to know those people and having them get to know you.
Here's an interesting question before you move on. Can you apply with multiple lenders?
Yes. Well, okay. Technically, now this is interesting. I've heard different stories on this. I've applied with multiple lenders because when I applied with Wells Fargo and then they lost my application, I don't even want to talk about it. Then I applied with somebody else and then they found my application at Wells Fargo. What I'm told is that when you get approved by the SBA, and the way that it works is you fill out the application, you go back and forth with the bank, they say it's ready, they upload it to the SBA portal if they can. Then the SBA portal gives them a guaranteed number when related to your application. It's an application guarantee number from the SBA. When that number is given, that means you've been loaned the money, the SBA's approved it, everything's cool. If they get another application in for the same federal ID number, it'll be kicked out because like, well, we already loaned this money. People know that that's happening, okay? And when you get that SBA loan number, which I don't even know that you'll get it, the bank gets it. I made them read it to me over the phone. That money has been set aside and earmarked just for you, and no one else can get a hold of that money. And it gets subtracted from the loan amount, from the congressionally mandated amount, 349 or something
So
like that.
two other quick questions, and then I think we can pop into the forgivable side. One
Okay.
is like just a practical thing. The bank says the loan's been sent to the SBA. Am I getting close?
You're as close as you possibly can be without getting approval. So the next thing that'll happen is the bank will hear back and you'll be given this SBA guarantee number. Then the bank will send to you a promissory note to sign. Now, if you're like me and you're freaking out, you call the bank every day and you try and find out what's going on. And if you push far enough, you'll be able to get somebody on the back end that can look to see what's happening. But for most people, you're just going to be in a waiting game. All right.
And then the other one is let's see. And then like is there any like restrictions on which utilities that this is covering, like electric and gas? But what about things like phone and internet?
It does seem, I was told that it will count for phone and internet. Now, understand, we are talking about, yeah, it does. Actually, I'm going to get to that in a minute. So I'll get to a little bit more of that in a minute. How much is forgivable? Let's talk about this. Okay, so let's move into that. But yes, it should include phone and internet. Amount of the loan to be forgivable. I say should because ultimately the bank's the one you're going to be dealing with on the back end to determine forgivability. And so hopefully everybody will have their ducks in a row and they'll include phone and internet at that point. All right, so in order for the loan to be forgivable, is everybody ready? Tim, are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay. Here we go.
All right, so this is going to take a few minutes. Only the amount spent during the first 8 weeks beginning the day you receive the funds have a chance of being forgivable. So it's beginning the first day you receive that money. So if we receive the money today, what is that, May 1st, then you've got 8 weeks from today to spend all the money in order to get it forgivable, okay? Now, if you don't spend all the money, you still may get money forgivable. It's just the amount that you spent in the first 8 weeks, that's the ones that you might be able to get forgivable. The rest of it will just become a loan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Now, there are people that are upset about this because they're like, well, wait a second. What if based on my payroll, the last paycheck for the last 2 weeks of that 8-week period falls after the 8-week period ends? So it's kind of like I don't technically pay them until after the 8-week period ends, but it's for that 8-week period. So there is a move to try and get them to allow for that as long as it's for that time period of those 8 weeks. So, but right now, technically, you have to have spent the money. All right.
Oh, this is a really good question because then somebody also came in and kind of answered what they've done for it, which is one person asked, if we're in a biweekly payroll schedule, Monday to the following Sunday, and we got funds on a Thursday, should we start using the loan from the Thursday or the following Monday when the pay period starts?
Yeah, so I think, and this is me, that what's going to matter is the pay date, not the pay period. So even though part of the payment that you're making would be for a period before you got the loan, it's irrelevant. The fact that you made it's the paycheck date that counts. All right.
And somebody said we decide to adjust our payroll to accommodate the PPP.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like basically on the back end, I'm not worried about paying them for time periods from before it started. That part I'm not worried about. I'm just going to write the check and I'll include all of it. But if there's a pay period that the paycheck is after the 8 weeks, I may pay them early, okay, or do a short pay. All right. Okay. Now, the other thing nonprofits need to understand, and really any business, but it's not like you have to spend the exact pot of money that you got. You just have to spend money on those things. So in other words, I have a client, it's a nonprofit, money. They didn't need the loan, okay? But they went ahead and got the loan anyway in case they need it in the future. So they put the loan in the bank and then they just spent their normal money on payroll. So that's fine. It's not like you have to, it's this money. It's not like they mark the dollar bills with a magic marker, okay? It's like grants, okay? You just got to show that you spent the money, okay? So now this brings up an important thing for nonprofits. If you're going to use the PPP money and decide to get it forgivable, you probably want to say, you know what, if I'm using it for payroll, and you can also use 25% of it for utilities and rent and mortgage interest, then you can't use those expenses on your grant reports, okay? So in other words, if I've got a grantor that's paying my payroll, I can't, if I'm using PP to pay the payroll, then I can't on the grant report for these 8 weeks, I can't say that I spent their money on payroll. Somebody else gave it to me. Otherwise, I'd be double dipping. Does that make sense? So what you want to do is you want to call your funders and you want to say, hey, listen, for these 8 weeks, I got PPP money. Can I reallocate how I spend your money for these 8 weeks and spend it on something else? I have a client, that same client I was telling you about. It's a battered women's shelter, and they're using grant money from a funder that they usually goes for payroll. They allow them to use it for other things related to program costs, and so they're doing all of these like upgrades to the property that they didn't get a chance to do. All right.
I mean, all funders should just be shifting things to just general operation at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, I will say one more thing. I also have a client, and we're going to run a little bit over. I told Tim we're going to run a few minutes over. But this is important. I have a client, and you can chat if you're one of these, where they take care of children, but it might be adults, and they get paid as a per day rate per client from the state. Okay, they get like a per day rate. It's like $130. You know, use foster care kids, whatever, group homes. It's like this. At the end of the year in Georgia, you have to do a cost report where you say what all your costs were. So at the end of 2020, they'll do a cost report, and then they divide that by the number of, they call them bed days, the number of people served per day, and they come out with the per diem rate. Well, if you get grant money, and this PPP would be grant money, that reduces your money on your per diem rate. So we ran the numbers. So they got all this money, and if they use it for if they use the PPP money, make it forgivable, then their per diem rate is going to go down in 2021. So they're like, you know what? Maybe I won't say that I used it for payroll. Maybe I'll just keep it as a loan. It's 1% for 2 years. So it's a decision that you got to make. Does anybody have any questions about
Who
that?
decides if it's forgivable? That was a good question. Is it the government or is it the lender?
So that's a great question. It's the
Yeah.
lender with guidance from the SBA. So I think you'll be
Great.
answering to the lender is what you'll ultimately, but I think the lender may have to get final approval from the SBA. I'm not sure. This is the fuzziest part of the whole thing. So as we go through this, because I'm just getting started here, I'm going to tell you what it's supposed to be based on what we're seeing today. But when you get in front of the loan officer at your bank 8 weeks from now, it may be something different. But this is the guidance that we have today. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I'm going to keep going back to this screen. Okay. 8 weeks has to be spent in the first 8 weeks. 75% of it must be, this is the second thing, 75% of the amount to be forgiven must be spent on payroll. Now, this is what I'm doing is I'm showing you what you have to do to get the loan forgivable, and I'm doing it in steps. Step 1, you got 8 weeks to spend the money. And the amount that you spend during the 8 weeks may possibly be forgivable. The amount to be forgiven, when you ask for an amount to be forgiven, 75% of it must be spent on payroll. And then the rest of it must be spent on rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. That's the rule, okay? Now, and then it's 100% forgivable if you do that, all right? So now I want you to look at this again. 75% of the amount to be forgiven must be spent on payroll. So now I'm going to do a little test here, and you can just answer in the chat, not in the Q&A, but the chat. And Tim, you can answer too. So PPP loans, $100,000. In the first 8 weeks, they spend all $100,000. They spend $75,000 on payroll. They spend $25,000 on rent and utilities. How much is forgivable? They spent it all. They spent 75% on payroll. What's forgivable?
Wouldn't it be all of it?
Exactly. All of it is forgivable.
Yay! I did it.
So that's pretty basic. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Now we're going to get weird. Okay.
Okay.
So now I want to focus in on this. This is probably the hardest thing I got to teach. 75% of the amount to be forgiven must be spent on payroll, and then the rest has to be spent on utilities, mortgage, rent. So again, 75% of the amount to be forgiven, must be spent on this stuff. It's not like you have to spend all of it in order to get it. It's not an all or nothing. It's not like it's all forgivable or none of it's forgivable. No, 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 no. It's not like that. It's just that whatever amount you ask to be forgiven, 75% of that amount must be spent on payroll. And then the rest, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Okay, so I'm going to teach you a little bit further. It's not like you have to ask for all the loan to be forgiven. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, I better spend all 75% on payroll and the otherwise I won't get any forgiven. No, it's just the portion that you ask to be forgiven, 75% of that must be.
And
so
the inverse, somebody asked, can you spend 100% on payroll?
Of course you can. At least 75%, yes. Now, but listen carefully here. Whatever amount you do ask forgiveness for, you better make sure that 75% of that amount is for payroll, okay? You better make sure that 75% of the amount asked to be forgiven is for payroll. Do you see how you don't have to ask forgiveness for all of it? It's just that the portion you ask forgiveness for, 75% of it has to be for payroll. So doing it as a math equation, amount forgiven times 75% equals payroll costs. Another way of saying it, amount forgiven equals 75% costs, payroll costs, and 25% rent and utilities. Okay, I'm hammering this home, all right? So I'm gonna say it one more time. You don't have to spend all of it in the 8 weeks. You don't have to spend 75% of it on payroll. It's just that whatever it is you do ask forgiveness for, 75% of that has to be on payroll. Okay, so here comes another example. PPP is $100,000. They spend it all in the first 8 weeks, so we're good with that. 60,000 is on payroll, 40,000 is on rent and utilities. How much is forgivable? None, 60,000, 80,000, or 100,000. And I'm gonna wait a minute or two for you guys to work this, to figure it out. You don't have to do the math. I mean, you could, but it's like, you can kind of reason it out. It'll help me see if I've explained this well. So what do you think, Tim? You want to hazard a guess? I know you act like you're listening, but who knows if you really are, because you're dealing with all the poll questions.
Man, I got children screaming. We got a bunch of people saying C. So I'm gonna go. Who wants to be a millionaire? I'm going with what the crowd thinks. I'm gonna say C.
That's right.
Thank you.
You are good. So what I want you to understand from this is, I don't have to spend all the money in the first 8 weeks. Even if I do, I don't have to spend 75% of it on payroll unless I want 100% of it to be forgiven. Okay. So, but in this case, and I did it as a math equation. The amount forgiven times 75% has to equal payroll costs. We know payroll costs were 60,000 in the first 8 weeks. So the amount forgiven times 75% equals 60,000. Tim, we are in algebra class right now.
I know. I did not. I mean, I saw the text, so I knew this was coming. But
I divide it by 75%, and now the amount forgiven is $80,000. So 80,000 times 75 equals $60,000 payroll costs. So
math is weird.
Yeah.
Math is weird.
Now I'm going to go back to this original slide. We ain't done yet, folks. We're trying to determine what the amount of the loan is forgivable. Has to be spent in the first 8 weeks, at least the amount you ask to be forgiven. Of that amount, 75% must be on payroll. And then the rest has to be spent on rent, utilities, mortgage, interest. Now, what do they mean by payroll? So this is where people go, well, we already covered what you mean by payroll. Before, we were talking about when you get the loan, how do you compute payroll costs? Now we're trying to determine, what do they mean by payroll in terms of forgiveness? Like, which payroll costs can you spend and get forgiven? It's the same. It's the exact same. Gross wages, bonus, vacation, employer paid health, it's all the same, with one little exception. You see this little vacation, sick, and family with the 4 asterisks next to it? So what that means is, this is what the dealio is. There is this tax credit that I'm going to teach you in a second. It's a credit for employees that got COVID or the people that are helping them, and so you can get a tax credit for those wages for 10 days. Those wages you can include in your PPP forgiveness, because then you'd be double dipping. Does that make sense? You can't get a credit back for wages that you paid, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second, and then say that you used the PPP loan for it, because you didn't. You got them refunded from this tax credit, so you can't use that. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That does make sense.
All right, now I'm gonna, here I keep going. Same slide. 8 weeks, 75% of the amount must be forgiven, must be spent on payroll. The rest used for rent, utilities, mortgage, and interest payments, okay? So this is what they mean by that. Now, they did not mean for you to grow. This was to keep you where you were at before February 15th. So it's a lease that's in force before February 15th, okay? It's mortgages that were in force before February 15th, and it's only the interest portion of them, and it's utilities that were in service before February 15th, and as you had asked, doesn't include phone. I'm told that it does. I'm assuming it would include an internet as well. Okay.
What about a third-party payroll provider?
Okay. So this gets back to the nightmare. I would think a third-party payroll provider will work. It's supposed to work. However, when you originally went and got the loan, a lot of people weren't able to get the loan very quickly or easily, so they were locked out because they were using a third-party provider. Because you say you have payroll as a nonprofit, you give them your federal ID number, and then when they look at the W-2s, it's somebody else's federal ID number and it gets kicked out. But if you were able to get through the process and you have a third-party provider, absolutely.
What about something like Neon CRM that has SaaS fees relating to your business operations? Like you're paying, $50 a month, $110 a month for, technology. Is that like a utility? No.
No.
Got it.
Not a chance. All right.
Got it. All right. Darn, folks. Sorry.
Yeah, I hear why. I know you were like, hey, I want to get some of that money. All right. So, okay. So here's the rules again. First 8 weeks, 75% must be of the amount requested to be forgiven must be spent on payroll. The rest used for rent, utilities, mortgage, interest payments. One more thing. Now, if you thought the other one was fuzzy, this is the real fuzzy one. You must maintain your staff and your payroll wages. That makes sense. Okay. But what does that really mean? It means you can't reduce your full-time equivalent headcount by more than 25%. Now, say you have 4 employees before this started. If you have 4 employees after, then you're fine. And you can get rid of 1 employee and replace them with another. It's just the headcount has to be the same, okay? Now, they realize that a lot of you have laid people off waiting for these monies, and they're not going to penalize you. So you still be able to get loan forgiveness as long as you bring them back or somebody else. You just got to get the headcount back up by June 30, 2020. All right. Now, if you have 4 employees and you go down to 3 employees, then you should be okay, and you should still be able to get full forgiveness, provided that you still spent 75% on payroll. But if you go down to 2 employees, you're going to get a reduced forgiveness, okay? So even if you did have to lower your head count and you didn't bring it back up, you will get a reduced forgiveness based on a pro rata calculation, okay? And in the resources at the end of this, I have an article that goes through trying to calculate that, which is kind of cool. You're probably going to have.
That's great.
Yeah,
and don't forget, folks, you can download the handout. Technically we're hitting the hour that we scheduled, but we've stated a few times that we're going to go over. We have a lot of questions, so hang around if you want. But if you got to go, we are still recording. So
I still got to do the 2 credits. I got to do the 2 credits.
Do the 2 credits. Let's go.
So anyway, let me finish this. So, and also payroll wages and salaries cannot decrease more than 25%. So in other words, you can't cut people's pay too much. If you do, you'll get a reduced credit. You won't get a completely you'll get a reduced forgiveness. So it's not like it's not an all or nothing here. It's just that if you want all of it, make sure you don't lower your head count more than 25%. You have till June 30 to get it back up, and make sure you don't decrease the total wages more than 25%. Okay. So if you do that, if you do instead reduce it more, then you'll get a reduced forgiveness. All right, so here's my 2 credits. So I'm going to do the 2 credits, and then we're off to the races. We'll just start answering questions, okay? And this will only take like 5 minutes, all right? And I want you to listen to this, because if you did not get a PPP loan, you need to look at these 2 other options, because you may be able to get some money this way. One of them is emergency pay tax credits. There are actually 3 credits part of this. And this was a law, it was passed as part of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCVR. And basically what this is, this was the first Corona law or act that was passed before they ever got around to the PPP. But what it does is it allows you as an employer, got to have W-2 people, to take a credit for the amounts paid to or on behalf of employees that are personally affected by the virus, okay? Now you take them on your 941, okay? So let's talk about the 3 credits. One credit is called the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Credit. This is for employees that have Corona, or employees that are caring with somebody with Corona, okay? The law requires you to give these people 10 days off with pay. And because of that, they're allowing you to get that money back as a credit, okay? Is there any who either has an employee with Corona or was caring for somebody with Corona? Go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm curious to see. The second credit is emergency family and medical leave. Now, you know how we don't have enough tests in this country? So as a result, if your employee is being quarantined with symptoms but hasn't had the test, you'll be able to get a credit for wages paid to them as well. Or if the employee is caring for somebody that's been quarantined with symptoms, okay? Additionally, there's third credit, the health insurance that you paid during the time these people were on leave, you can get a tax credit for that. So those are the 3 credits, okay? So is there anybody that's been personally affected by COVID, Tim?
I not from a work standpoint, but personally, yes. And then where there was an organization, somebody did say we had several people.
Okay, all right. Now, and I mentioned this before, if you get this credit, then you can't say that you used PPP dollars to pay the amount, since you are getting them reimbursed through the credit, okay? Okay, now, I'm going to go through the first one of the 3 credits just to show you how it works. They're all basically work very much the same, but I just want to give you how it works. So this is the first credit for employers that give 10 working days off with pay to an employee quarantined with COVID, or to an employee who's caring for someone quarantined with COVID. And the credit is equal to the lesser of the employee's daily rate or daily pay for those 10 days, or $510 per day if the employee is sick themselves, or $200 per day if the employee is a caretaker of somebody. God bless the person who's making $510 a day. But anyway, now there's another cap though. The total quarterly credit, and you compute this quarterly, cannot be more than 7.65% of all wages, not just those people, but all of the employees for the quarter. And there's another one. There's another cap. The total annual credit can't be more than $2,000 per employee. Okay? So you apply for the credit and you use the credit when computing your 941 for the quarter. It started with first quarter of 2020. They did not fix the forms. They didn't add a field to the form. Your payroll company may not even done anything. They may have just filed it for you. If this is you can amend your 941 for first quarter, and you have to manually write in when you do these things on the 941 what the credit is, so that you can get the credit. And you can ask for it as a refund, okay? So this all ends with fourth quarter of 2020, party's over, okay? So that's that credit. Now, The last credit, and this one's pretty good, and then we'll take questions, we'll be done, is retention credit. So this is a credit that if you don't get PPP, you can use this credit. If you do get PPP, you can't use this credit. So it's one or the other. So it's for organizations that were forced to close by the government. So it would be like if you're a performing arts organization, your theater and stuff like that, you couldn't work. Or you were able to work, but the gross receipts were down more than 50% over the exact same time last year. Okay, so the amount is equal to 50% of wages paid up to 10,000 of wages, and this is per employee. So the maximum credit is 10,000 times 50% or $5,000 per person for the year. So the credit's 5,000 per person per the year. Okay. And again, just like with the other credit, you take it off on your quarterly 941. You'll have to manually put it on the first quarter one. Hopefully by second quarter, they'll have an amended 941 that already has fields for this. Okay. So you can't do it if you get the PPP. You got to do one or the other. So you got to figure out which one gives you more. Okay. Usually the PPP is better. Now, as a practical matter, you probably are just going to try and get the PPP, and then if you don't get it, go for the credit if you can. Okay. But here's an example. You can see how you have 4 employees. The total is $200,000. One makes $100,000. One makes 50, one makes 35, and this last poor schmo only makes 15,000. So the total is 200,000. So PPP equals 200,000 divided by 12 times 2.5, 41,667. How much would they get for the employee retention credit? Does anybody want to hazard a guess? You can chat me up. Put it in the chat. It's pretty simple. We know what the maximum credit is per employee. It's 50% of
20,000. 20,000.
Right, 20,000. So that's obviously this one's better. Now, so this is usually the case because you usually have like somebody making a lot more money and it kind of goes down from there. But if we're living in an egalitarian world, here we have $200,000. We have 10 employees. Each one makes 20,000. Well, in that case, you still get 41,000, 200,000 divided by 12. So that's the same because the total's the same. But how much are we going to get now with the retention credit? Anybody know?
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
People are getting their calculators out. 50,000.
Well, yeah, 50,000. So this one's better here.
I mean, I'd have to do it no matter what. So.
All right. So anyway, here's my summary, and then we'll do questions. You want to go for the SBA advance of $10,000. If you haven't already, keep checking the site. If it pops up, do it. Go for the PPP. Keep it simple, though, okay, at this point. Just use 2019 wages. Just don't even include health insurance and retirement. And you also want to pray to God because you're at the end of the line, and they're probably going to run out of money before they get to you. If you don't get it, go for the credit if you can, all right? These are a bunch of resources that you can go to. I just did it as links. The first one is where you can apply through Divvy, and Divvy takes you to Cabbage, so it's basically kind of the same deal. And then here's a list of vendors up here, or lenders, and this is where you go to apply for the EIDL loan in advance. Here's facts about the PPP program. Here's info on the tax credits. Here's more facts about the PPP, and then here's some employee retention stuff. All right. So
and this deck is in the handout section in your GoToWebinar interface, folks. So you'd be able to download this, or if for some reason that's not working, you know, we're going to be following up. We can make sure that y'all get access to the recording and whatever else you need.
I'm going to do one plug for myself here.
Of course. Hey, after all of this, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So this offer, what's the date today?
It's May 1st. It's Friday.
So this ends in 2 days. So it ends May the 3rd at 10 p.m. And we have a 3-day webinar series at QuickBooks Made Easy. We're doing it May 12th, 13th, and 14th. Then we're doing it again on the 19th, 20th, and 21st. This one on the 12th, 13th, 14th is for desktop users. and then the one on the 19th to 21st is for online users. It gives you everything you need to know about QuickBooks. It's 2 hours a day for 3 days. You're with the same group of people every day. We talk to each other in the chat. If you like listening to me, you're going to love this. And basically, we're going to go through every single thing you need to know about QuickBooks, okay? If you are a nonprofit, okay? Now, if you don't like learning that way, you can also purchase one of our training, demand trainings that are normally $229. We're going to give it to you for $99. The 3-day webinars, $49, we're going to give them to you for $149. You got to use these codes, okay? And then tech support, you can call. If you sign up for tech support, it's $499 normally. It's $249 for you for a year. You got to use these codes, Neon 200 off, and you've got until May the 3rd, which is that Sunday night? Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. in order to get this. So what you do is you go to QuickBooksMadeEasy.com. Here it is, and then you go to courses and training. And if you want the live webinar, you go to webinar. If you want the training, the on-demand training, you go here. If you want the tech support, you go here. So I'll go to the webinars. And you should do this anyway so you can see what topics are being covered. And it's called Fundamentals 3-Day Series. And here it is, QuickBooks Made Easy 2020 desktop. You click on it and it'll give you a list of all the topics that are covered, but it is huge, all right? And I'm trying to see if I can find here's where all the information is. Here we go. This is what's covered on day 1, day 2, and day 3. So it's all kinds of stuff. And then the other big thing that people want is they want the training, and you would just go to courses and training right here, and you would pick on-demand courses. And we have 2 big products there. One is, and I got to move because this is getting old, Essentials and Beyond the Essentials. And then the last one is the technical support. And yes, we can dial into your software. It's an entire year. So when you're going through this, you just choose whether you are in QuickBooks Online or desktop. Whoops. You pick a year, and then you pick your option, and then you click Add to Cart, and then you use that code.
It's fancy, Greg.
All right.
And
all right.
folks,
So
Greg and QuickBooks Made Easy team is Neon One's official endorsed QuickBooks trainer, supporter, all that good stuff. So highly recommend you check that out. And I noticed you got that kind of deeper dive on the PPP stuff there for a free webinar on the 7th too.
Yeah, that's right. You can sign up for that free webinar if you we'll go back up to the top.
We've had a lot of questions, so I want to make sure that we kind of dive into some of them, folks. We had so many that I'm probably, what I might do is maybe send this over to Greg to so you could kind of comb through, and maybe we can do a blog post or something later on to address some stuff. But let's hit a few. Somebody's asked this to address it twice, so I'm going to make sure that we get this person's question addressed. Can you talk about the accounts payable qualifications? We're doing a roof replacement that is happening in May. Does that count as
so
AP?
Remember, AP is specifically for the regular loan, the first one, the EIDL. Yep. It's not for the PPP loan at all. So the 8-week period is irrelevant when it comes to that. Because the PPP loan does not cover payables. So the PPP loan won't cover that. So your 8-week, you're worried about the 8-week, it's not going to cover that.
What about an interest on a construction loan already in place?
Interest on mortgages is supposed to be included, and interest on construction loan is a good question. It is a mortgage, isn't it? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Okay. Let's see. All right. What does forced to close include? Stopping most programs, but trying to do virtual?
Forced to close means you were told to close by the government. It was that you were closed to close. Like you could still work virtually, but if you weren't able to do anything in the office, like if they told you that it's more for retail people, right?
Yeah.
Where, you have a business that way. If your business doesn't happen that way anyway, I'm not sure that would apply to you.
Okay, let's see. Okay, this is a good one. We've received the PPP loan based on 100% payroll. We don't have rent, utilities, or mortgage costs. Now we realize we cannot spend 100% of the loan on regular payroll in the first 8 weeks. Can we give bonuses over to? We've actually had a few questions about increasing people's wages, bonuses, stuff like that. So this covers a
I
bunch of
think
questions.
I think you can. I think you can. What you can't do is when you give them a bonus during that 8-week period, they're going to take that amount and they're going to annualize it. And if it's more than $100,000, then that's not going to work. Okay, I almost want to do an Excel spreadsheet on this, but they're going to annualize it. Does that make sense to you? So it's like I can't if the person makes 100,000, oh well, makes $50,000 a year, and so their normal pay would be fine. And even if I gave them a bonus that annualized would be 75,000 a year, they'd be okay. But once you get over 100, then you've screwed it up.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Tim?
It does. It does. I'm
All right.
trying to find maybe one last question. Folks, there's so many great questions. I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to get to some of these. Okay, I'm going to go with this one because it's pretty comprehensive.
All right.
We are a nonprofit and we're approved as of today for a PPP loan. Our current funding is a federal grant project that covers 100% of payroll costs for 9 employees. The project funding ends September 30th, 2020. Currently, there is no other source of income or assets to retain employees beginning October 1st. If I accept the SBA PPP loan to use for payroll and rent October 1st, will our nonprofit still qualify for the forgiveness clause?
No. If you have to spend the money on payroll during the 8 weeks beginning the day you get the money, and I don't think you can delay getting the money until October 1st.
Okay.
The whole program is supposed to end on June 30. What you can do is ask the federal government if we can use the money for payroll for something else.
Okay.
So, because the whole idea behind the program was to help you keep employees working. Well, the federal government's already paying your employees. See what I'm saying? So probably the better option is for you to just keep it as a loan. It's only 1%, and then pay it back when you need to.
Whew. All right. There's just so many. I'm going to make sure that you get all these. These are some really good ones.
Ask
Everyone,
a couple more. Ask a couple more.
I
Yeah.
got to go help my wife watch her kids.
I know.
So
All right.
folks, this was great. We are going to be putting this recording up. Thank you, Gregg, for another comprehensive deep dive. The fact that you were able to put all this together so quickly, so comprehensively is just a testament to just how amazing that you are in your own work. So
I'm amazing.
you are.
All right.
This is awesome. This is great. Hopefully, folks, that you really enjoyed today's content. Kind of the next, what are we doing next in our MPO's Rise campaign? Yes, the next one. We have 2 things that we're going to be planning for the month of May. On May 12th, we'll be joined by Charity Dynamics. Yes, it is cabbage.com, by the way, right?
Yeah, with a K.
There you go. Oh, with a K. There you go, not a C. So basically, our next webinar is going to be focused on Giving Tuesday. Now what? So we're going to be joined by our friends at Charity Dynamics to address, great, Giving Tuesday's next Tuesday, May 5th. What do we do after that, right? Like, even if you're not participating, there's going to be a lot of questions on how do we move forward. That's going to be a comprehensive deep dive. I talked with their team over there earlier today on that. Really excited for that content. And then later in the month, I believe May 20th, if you're an arts and cultural organization, join us. We're going to be joined by Mary Kalan, and we're going to do a deep dive on how arts and culture organizations specifically can navigate the coronavirus crisis and kind of look toward the future. So really, really excited about that one. The show must go on is the title of that one. So
apparently.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, Greg. This was great. We're going to get this recording up. We're going to make sure that folks get the slides, and you'll definitely be hearing from us. Always a pleasure, Greg. You have a great and lovely weekend, too. It's Friday. Not that that means anything anymore, but like,
Right.
there you go. Thank
All
you,
right.
folks. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.